My name is Harold. I'm 81 years old now, but this part of the story starts about 2 years ago, just after I turned 79. For 45 years, I was married to my Eleanor. We built a life together, a good one. She's been gone 10 years now, but the house still felt like ours. I kept it tidy, paid the bills on time. My engineering pension wasn't huge, but combined with Social Security and the savings Eleanor and I had put away, I was comfortable, independent. That was important to me. I served my country, worked hard my whole life, and I wasn't looking for handouts. My son, Raymond, is in his early 40s. He's married to Melissa. They live about an hour away. They visited, maybe once a month, sometimes less, usually when they needed something, though they never said it outright. Raymond always seemed impatient, like my stories were taking up valuable time. Melissa would smile nicely, but her eyes darted around the room, probably calculating what might be worth something someday. I tried not to see it, but it was there. They'd talk about their struggles, the cost of things, always hinting. I'd help when I could, maybe slip Raymond $100 here and there, telling myself it was what Eleanor would have wanted. Then came the fall. It wasn't dramatic. I tripped on the edge of the rug in the hallway. One minute I was heading to the kitchen for coffee. The next I was on the floor, a sharp pain shooting through my hip. I couldn't get up. Took me what felt like hours to drag myself to the phone, call 911. Turned out I'd fractured my hip badly. Surgery was needed, and the doctor said recovery would be long. Months of physical therapy, needing assistance. He said with hard work I could get back on my feet, maybe not 100%, but close. That was my goal. Get back home, to my house, to Eleanor's garden. Raymond and Melissa showed up at the hospital, putting on a big show of concern. Melissa fussed over my pillows. Raymond talked loudly to the nurses about getting me the best care. But then the conversation shifted. They started talking about how difficult recovery would be at home, how expensive in-home care was, how I really shouldn't be alone anymore. I was still foggy from the pain medication after surgery, feeling weak and dependent, which I hated. I told them I wanted to hire a home health aide, use my savings. I had enough set aside for emergencies, and this felt like one. Raymond shook his head, looking grave. Dad, you don't understand the costs. Those agencies drain your savings in no time. And what if you fall again when they're not here? Melissa chimed in, her voice full of fake sympathy. Raymond's right, Harold. We've been looking into places. There's a facility not too far, Green Valley Care. It's practical. They have therapists right there. It makes more sense financially. We have to be realistic. Practical. That word hung in the air. I knew what it meant. It meant cheap, state-funded. I argued, weakly, mentioned other nicer facilities I'd seen advertised, places with gardens, private rooms. Raymond cut me off. Dad, you're not thinking clearly right now. Those places cost a fortune, more than your entire savings would cover for even a year. We can't afford that. Green Valley is clean, safe, and it's what we can manage. He pulled out some papers. This is just for the hospital discharge, authorizing us to handle the transfer, arrange your care. He held the pen out. I hesitated, my gut screaming at me, but I was tired, sore, and they were relentless. I signed where he pointed, feeling a wave of despair wash over me. The move happened fast, too fast. One day, I was in a hospital bed dreaming of my own armchair. The next, I was being wheeled into Green Valley Care. The smell hit me first. Stale disinfectant, boiled cabbage, and something vaguely medicinal. The linoleum floors were scuffed, the walls painted a depressing beige. My room was small, shared with another man who stared blankly at a flickering television screen. There was a thin curtain for privacy, a metal-framed bed, and a small dresser. That was it. Raymond and Melissa supervised the move-in, which meant they dropped off 2 suitcases containing a few changes of clothes and my toiletries. We'll put the important things from the house into storage, Dad, Raymond said briskly. Don't you worry about a thing. I saw my favorite reading lamp, Eleanor's picture from the nightstand, being loaded into Raymond's SUV along with boxes I hadn't even packed. My things, my life, being put into storage. Before they left, Raymond stood by my bedside. He was wearing a new watch, looked expensive. Gold. He clapped me awkwardly on the shoulder. Look, Dad, this is for your own good, really. We just can't afford those fancy places right now, but we'll visit all the time. You'll get good therapy here, get back on your feet. His eyes didn't meet mine. Melissa stood behind him, forcing another smile. I looked at my son, the boy I'd taught to ride a bike, the man I'd helped through college. I saw the lie plain as day. This wasn't about my good, it was about his convenience, his money, mine probably. But I was too weak, too heartsick to fight just then. All I could manage was a weak nod. I trust your judgment, son, I heard myself say, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. They practically bolted after that, relief clear on their faces, and I was left alone in the beige room with the smell of cabbage and the sound of someone coughing down the hall. The reality of Green Valley hit hard over the next few days. It wasn't just basic, it was neglectful. The staff were overworked and underpaid. Call buttons went unanswered for long stretches. Meals were bland, lukewarm mush served on plastic trays. Physical therapy sessions were short, rushed, and often canceled due to staff shortages. I saw residents left unattended for hours, hygiene sometimes overlooked. It wasn't maliciousness, mostly, just a profound lack of resources and motivation. A place people were sent when their families wanted them out of sight, out of mind, on the state's dime. My anger started to burn through the despair. How could Raymond do this? How could he justify it? The answer, unfortunately, started becoming clearer with each brief, infrequent visit they paid me. Raymond would show up, check his watch constantly, talk about work stress. Melissa would chatter about shopping trips, new furniture they'd bought, a weekend getaway they were planning. Once, Raymond drove up in a brand new luxury SUV. German engineering. Must have cost a fortune. Got a great deal, he mumbled when I stared at it from my window. Company car bonus? Another lie. He started giving me $20 a week. For snacks, Dad? He'd say magnanimously, pulling it from a wallet thick with cash. $20. From my own money, I had no doubt. I learned later he'd quickly gained access to my bank accounts, citing my inability to manage finances after the fall, likely using that hospital paperwork as justification. My pension, my Social Security, my savings, it was all under his control, and clearly it was funding his sudden lifestyle upgrade. Melissa would post pictures on her social media. Fancy dinners, new clothes, smiling selfies captioned #blessed and #living our best life. The contrast between their curated happiness and my grim reality was a constant bitter pill. I knew I couldn't stay there, not just for my physical health, but for my sanity, my dignity. I needed to get out, to understand the full extent of what Raymond had done, and I needed help. But how? I felt trapped. Visitors were monitored. Phone access was limited to a payphone in the hallway that rarely worked. Then, one afternoon, sitting in the dreary common room pretending to watch TV, I overheard two orderlies talking near the nurses' station. They were complaining, whispering anxiously. "Did you hear? Apex bought us out." "Yeah, Apex Senior Holdings, big private equity firm. Hope they don't start cutting staff. Or worse, shut us down." Apex Senior Holdings. The name sent a jolt through me. Frank Henderson, my platoon commander back in Korea. We'd been through hell together, saved each other's skin more than once. We'd kept in touch sporadically over the years, lost track mostly after Eleanor passed. But I knew Frank had gone into business, done incredibly well. Private equity, that sounded right. Could it possibly be his Apex? It was a long shot, but it was the first flicker of hope I'd had in weeks. Now the problem was confirming it and contacting him. Security was tight, and Raymond had taken my personal cell phone, saying I didn't need it here. I thought about the payphone, but I didn't have Frank's number memorized, and I couldn't risk being overheard. I needed a secure channel. I started observing the staff more closely. Most were just doing their time, indifferent. But there was one young orderly, Gabriella, quiet, efficient, sometimes slipped me an extra juice box or adjusted my pillow without being asked. She had kind eyes. I waited for an opportunity when she was helping me back to my room. I kept my voice low. "Gabriella," I said, "I need a small favor. A very discreet one. Can you look something up for me online when you have a moment? The CEO of Apex Senior Holdings." I palmed her the $20 Raymond had given me that week. "For your trouble," I added. She hesitated, looking nervous, but tucked the bill away. "Okay, Mr. Harold, but quick." The next day, she slipped me a folded piece of paper during my mealtime. On it was a name, Franklin T. Henderson, CEO, Apex Senior Holdings, and a picture printed from the internet. It was him, older, grayer, wearing an expensive suit, but unmistakably Frank. My heart leaped. Now for the contact. I couldn't ask Gabriella to make a call. It was too risky for her. I needed another way. I still had that old, simple burner phone I kept in my emergency kit at home, the one I used for fishing trips, practically indestructible. Had Raymond missed it? Unlikely. but possible he didn't think it was worth taking. Maybe it was tucked away in the stored boxes. Or maybe... I thought about the small lockbox I kept bolted inside my old army footlocker in the garage. The one Raymond always complained was junk. Inside was the burner phone, fully charged usually, and a few other emergency items. If he just took surface items, I needed to get someone to check. It was a gamble. I wrote a short, careful note to my neighbor, old Mrs. Agnes, a kind widow I used to share garden vegetables with. The note asked her, as a huge favor, to check my garage, specifically the footlocker, for an old green phone. And if she found it, to hold on to it for me. I gave Gabriella another 20, asking her to please mail the letter for me, explaining it was just to a neighbor asking her to water my plants. She agreed, though she looked uneasy. Days turned into a week. Nothing. I started to lose hope. Maybe Raymond had cleared out the garage completely. Maybe Mrs. Agnes hadn't gotten the note or couldn't find the locker. Maybe Gabriella never mailed it. The uncertainty was agony. Then, one evening, Gabriella slipped me another note as she collected my dinner tray. It just said, "Neighbor called the front desk. Left message, plant is watered." My code. Mrs. Agnes had found the phone. Getting it was the next hurdle. Raymond's visits were my only chance. The next time he came, making his usual show of dutiful concern, I played my part. I acted weaker, more confused than usual. "Raymond," I mumbled, "my glasses. I think I left my old spare pair in the garage? In that dusty old footlocker, maybe? Can't see well with these reading ones." He sighed dramatically. "Dad, I cleared out most of that junk already. Please, son," I pleaded, putting on my best frail act. My eyes are really bothering me. He finally grumbled his assent, probably seeing it as an easy task to prove his care. He left, and I waited, my nerves frayed. 2 days later, he returned. He tossed a dusty, scratched glasses case on my bedside table. "Found them," he said dismissively. "Anything else?" My heart pounded. Inside the case, tucked behind the old glasses, was the small, sturdy burner phone. Mrs. Agnes had understood. That night, long after the lights were out and the snores of my roommate filled the small space, I huddled under the thin blanket. My hands trembled as I powered on the burner phone. Battery was still good, thank God. Finding Frank's direct line wasn't easy. I had to guess based on old numbers, navigate corporate directories online using the phone's slow browser. Finally, I got through to what sounded like an executive assistant's voicemail. I didn't leave my name. I just said, my voice low and disguised as best I could, "Message for Commander Frank Henderson. Sergeant Major Harold reporting, requesting immediate fire support at Grid Reference Green Valley Care. Repeat, Grid Reference Green Valley. Urgent." I hung up, heart hammering against my ribs. Would he get it? Would he understand? Would he even care after all these years? The waiting was the hardest part. Days crawled by. Nothing changed at Green Valley. Raymond didn't visit. Doubt gnawed at me. Maybe Frank thought it was a prank. Maybe he was too busy. Maybe our bond wasn't as strong as I remembered. Then, about a week after my call, things started to shift. Subtly at first. The head nurse stopped by my room, asked if I was comfortable. An administrator I'd never seen before introduced himself, inquired about my therapy progress. My meals seemed slightly better, served warmer. The call button was answered faster. The staff looked nervous. Whispers followed me down the hall. I didn't know what was happening, but something was different. Then came the renovations. Suddenly, work crews appeared on the top floor, which had always been administrative offices. Rumors flew. They were building luxury suites. For whom? It seemed absurd in a place like Green Valley. A few days later, Raymond showed up for one of his perfunctory visits. He strode towards my room down the familiar, depressing hallway. I watched from my bed as he reached the door, looked inside, and stopped dead. His face registered confusion, then annoyance. The bed was empty, stripped bare. A nurse I vaguely recognized intercepted him. "Mr. Harold's last name isn't in this room anymore, sir." Raymond frowned. "What are you talking about? Where is he?" "He's been relocated," the nurse said, her voice carefully neutral. "New corporate policy regarding veteran residents' accommodations. This way, please." She led a bewildered and increasingly irritated Raymond towards the elevators, heading to the top floor. I could only imagine his thoughts. Maybe they'd moved me to an even worse room? The nurse led him down a newly carpeted, softly lit corridor I hadn't known existed, stopping before a heavy oak door. She knocked softly. "Mr. Harold's last name? Your son is here to see you." She pushed the door open and gestured for Raymond to enter. I was sitting in a comfortable leather armchair reading a newspaper. A real one, delivered that morning. The room, no, the suite, was large, beautifully furnished. Soft lighting, thick carpet. A large window with an actual view. A small kitchenette gleamed in one corner. There was a large flat-screen TV on the wall, currently off. A private physical therapist was just packing up her equipment near a dedicated exercise area. The air smelled faintly of lemon polish, not cabbage. Raymond stood frozen in the doorway, his jaw slack. He stared at me, then around the room, then back at me. Confusion warred with disbelief on his face. "Dad, what the hell is this? Where are we?" Before I could answer, the nurse spoke again, her tone professionally crisp. "This is the chairman's suite, sir. Per directives from Apex Senior Holdings corporate office. Your father has been reassigned here." Raymond sputtered. "Apex? Corporate? What are you talking about? Who authorized this? I handle my father's affairs. All inquiries regarding resident placement must be directed to Apex Corporate, sir," the nurse recited, clearly coached. "Now, if you'll excuse me." She gave a small nod and quickly backed out, closing the door softly, leaving Raymond alone with me in the sudden, opulent silence. He stared at me, finally finding his voice, suspicion dawning in his eyes. "Dad, did you do this? How?" I looked up from my newspaper, meeting his gaze calmly. I didn't smile. I just held his stare. Let him wonder, let him start to feel the ground shifting beneath his feet. His confusion quickly curdled into anger and a touch of panic. He started pacing, demanding answers. How could this happen? Who was paying for it? He tried calling the administrator, but the call went straight to voicemail. He tried grilling me, but I just gave non-committal answers, letting his frustration build. The final blow landed the next day. A security guard, taller, more professional than the usual Green Valley staff, politely intercepted Raymond at the main entrance when he returned demanding answers. The guard handed him a laminated card. "New visitation protocols for the executive floor, sir. All visits require 48-hour advance scheduling and written approval from Apex Holdings corporate office." Raymond stared at the card, then at the guard's impassive face. "Apex Corporate? You mean I need permission to see my own father?" "That is correct, sir." He tried arguing, then demanding, then pleading. The guard remained polite but firm. Access denied. Raymond stood there on the sidewalk outside Green Valley, shut out, staring up at the building where his father now resided in luxury he couldn't comprehend. Behind doors he could no longer open. He had lost control. And I knew, sitting comfortably in my suite, watching the birds outside my clean window, that this was only the beginning. Frank had provided the covering fire. Now it was time to plan the counter-offensive. Phase 1 was complete. Life in the chairman's suite was different. More than different, it was restorative. Having a private nurse check on me regularly, eating actual well-prepared food, and especially the dedicated physical therapy sessions worked wonders. Frank had insisted on the best care, flying in specialists if needed. My hip healed properly, the strength returning to my legs faster than the Green Valley therapists could have ever managed. More importantly, my mind felt clearer, sharper than it had in months. The fog of betrayal and despair lifted, replaced by a cold, clear resolve. Frank's intervention had saved me from neglect, but the core wound, my own son's callous greed and disregard, still festered. Comfort wasn't enough. I needed accountability. Frank visited often. Sometimes we'd just talk, reminisce about the old days in Korea, the bond forged under fire feeling as strong as ever. Other times we'd discuss strategy. He'd update me on what his people were finding. It turned out getting me comfortable was just Frank's opening move. He was as disgusted by Raymond's actions as I was. "Men like your son, Harold," he'd said, his voice low and hard. "They mistake kindness for weakness. They need to be taught consequences." I agreed. This wasn't just about getting my money back. It was about ensuring Raymond understood, truly understood, the gravity of what he'd done. Frank's team was incredibly efficient. Forensic accountants, private investigators, sharp lawyers. They moved quickly and quietly. Updates came through Frank, usually during our evening chats over a surprisingly good cup of coffee in my suite. The picture they painted was worse than I'd imagined. First, they confirmed Raymond had indeed abused that limited healthcare power of attorney I signed in the hospital. He'd used it, likely with some fast-talking or outright deception at the bank, to gain broader access to my main accounts shortly after I was moved to Green Valley. It was systematic. Large withdrawals started almost immediately, draining my savings account. My pension checks and Social Security deposits were rerouted to an account solely under his control. Then came the forgery. They found copies of checks drawn on my old checking account, an account Raymond should not have had access to, with signatures that were clearly not mine. Close maybe, but definitely forged. These checks coincided with major purchases, the down payment on his luxury SUV, expensive trips Melissa posted about online, even large cash withdrawals. It wasn't just mismanagement, it was deliberate theft, Worst of all was the identity theft. Using my personal information obtained from my mail, which he'd helpfully offered to manage for me after the fall, and possibly those initial papers, Raymond had opened multiple high-interest credit cards in my name. He ran up significant debt on them, paying only the minimums, likely planning to let them default and ruin my credit, perhaps thinking I wouldn't be around long enough to notice or fight it. This felt like the deepest violation, stealing not just my money, but my name, my decades-long reputation for fiscal responsibility. Frank's team compiled everything meticulously: bank statements, credit card records, copies of forged checks, timelines matching withdrawals to Raymond and Melissa's known spending sprees. Social media was surprisingly helpful there. They even traced the funds used for the down payment on Raymond and Melissa's house extension, showing a direct line from my depleted savings. With the evidence mounting, Frank's lawyers started applying pressure. They identified the specific accounts where Raymond held the traceable funds and managed, through court orders citing suspected financial elder abuse and fraud, to get legal holds placed on them. It wasn't all of it. Raymond had clearly spent a lot, but it was a significant chunk. The effect was almost immediate. I didn't hear it from Raymond directly, of course. His visitation requests were still being routinely denied by Apex Corporate. But Frank got reports. Raymond's corporate credit card was declined during a business lunch. The automatic lease payment for the luxury SUV bounced. Whispers started at his workplace after Frank's team made some discreet, deniable inquiries with HR about standard verification procedures for employees in sensitive financial positions. An anonymous, untraceable tip was also filed with the IRS regarding potential undeclared income, suggesting they look closely at his recent large purchases versus his reported salary. The financial squeeze was on. I imagined Raymond's growing panic, the frantic calls to banks, the dawning realization that his carefully constructed facade was cracking. There was a certain grim satisfaction in it, I admit. He had shown me no mercy. He deserved none in return. My own recovery continued. Frank eventually arranged for me to move out of the nursing home entirely. Not back to my old house just yet. Raymond still had the keys and potentially some legal claim via the POA he'd abused, which needed to be fully revoked first. Instead, Frank set me up in a comfortable, secure serviced apartment near his own residence, complete with ongoing physical therapy and nursing support as needed. It felt good to have my own space again, even if it wasn't truly home. Frank's security detail remained discreetly present. Meanwhile, the pressure on Raymond escalated from financial to social. Frank believed in total campaigns. He knew that for men like Raymond, image and social standing were almost as important as money. He waited for the right opportunity. It came in the form of the annual City Charity Gala, a major event for the local business community, exactly the kind of place Raymond and Melissa loved to be seen. Frank secured a prominent table. He invited me as his guest of honor. I was hesitant at first. I wasn't one for fancy parties, but Frank insisted. "It's time they see you, Harold. Not as the frail old man they abandoned, but as the man you are, strong, dignified, and under my protection." So I put on the new suit Frank had insisted on buying me. Looking in the mirror, I barely recognized myself from the gaunt figure I'd been just months before at Green Valley. I stood taller. My eyes were clear. I felt ready. We arrived at the gala. Heads turned as Frank Henderson, the powerful CEO of Apex Holdings, walked in with me on his arm. People knew Frank, respected his influence. Whispers started immediately. Who was the distinguished older gentleman with him? We took our seats at Frank's table right near the front, and then I saw them. Raymond and Melissa, across the ballroom, schmoozing with some local council members. They were dressed to the nines, forcing smiles, desperately trying to maintain their image despite the growing rumors and financial stress I knew they were under. Melissa spotted us first. Her smile froze, her eyes widening in shock. She gripped Raymond's arm, nodding subtly in our direction. Raymond turned. When he saw me, looking healthy, well-dressed, sitting beside one of the most powerful men in the room, his face went white as a sheet. He looked like he'd seen a ghost who was very much alive and apparently doing extremely well. Throughout the evening, we didn't approach them. We didn't need to. The effect was profound. People noticed their shock, saw them watching us furtively. The contrast was stark. Raymond and Melissa looking increasingly strained and uncomfortable, while Frank and I were approached by community leaders, Frank introducing me simply as his oldest and dearest friend. The message was clear without a word being spoken. Harold was protected, valued. Raymond and Melissa were not. They left early, practically fleeing the ballroom. I heard later through Frank's channels that the fallout from the gala was significant. Questions were asked. Why did Raymond look so terrified of his own father? What was the story there? Combined with the financial rumors, Raymond's social standing took a nosedive. Melissa, apparently, faced a barrage of questions from her family and friends who had only heard Raymond's narrative of a difficult father needing care. Raymond didn't take it lying down, initially. His desperation fueled some clumsy countermoves. His lawyer sent letters demanding the release of the frozen funds, citing the POA, easily countered by Frank's team presenting evidence of duress and suspected fraud. He even made a bizarre attempt to have me declared mentally incompetent, trying to regain control. Frank arranged for evaluations by top geriatric psychiatrists, whose reports painted a picture of a man fully lucid, sharp, and deeply wronged. Raymond's petition was laughed out of court, further damaging his credibility. He even tried calling me directly on the apartment line, alternating between tearful apologies and veiled threats. I recorded the calls, per Frank's lawyer's instructions, and turned them over as further evidence of his instability and manipulation. He was digging his own grave deeper with every move. Finally, the time came for the endgame. Frank's lawyers had finalized the restitution calculations, the stolen savings, the pension funds, the Social Security diversions, the costs incurred by the identity theft, plus damages for emotional distress and the cost of my improved care necessitated by his neglect. The number was staggering, enough to wipe Raymond out completely, likely forcing bankruptcy. Harold arranged the meeting, not at my apartment, not at his home, which was likely heading towards foreclosure anyway. We met at the downtown offices of Frank's corporate law firm, impersonal, imposing, reinforcing who held the power now. I sat at one side of the large conference table. Frank sat beside me, a silent, formidable presence. His lead lawyer sat at the head. Raymond was ushered in. He looked terrible. He'd lost weight. His expensive suit hung loosely on him. His eyes were bloodshot and darting nervously. Melissa was not with him. Frank's team had hinted she'd already lawyered up herself, likely trying to cut a deal to save her own skin once the full extent of Raymond's fraud became undeniable. Raymond sat opposite me, avoiding my gaze. My lawyer began, laying out the case calmly, methodically. He detailed the timeline of the deception, the abuse of the power of attorney, the forged checks, the credit cards opened fraudulently. He presented copies of bank statements, forged documents, transaction records, even stills from surveillance footage showing Raymond using cards linked directly to my accounts for personal luxury. The evidence was overwhelming, irrefutable. Raymond just slumped in his chair, shaking his head, muttering denials that even he didn't seem to believe. When the lawyer finished, I spoke for the first time. My voice was quiet but steady. No anger, no tears, just cold, hard finality. "Raymond," I said, finally forcing him to look at me. "You took my money. You stole my name. You threw me away in that place. Left me to deteriorate while you lived high on what was mine. You betrayed every trust a son owes a father." I paused, letting the silence stretch. "Your financial situation," I continued, gesturing to the lawyer, "is irreparable. Frank's legal team will pursue civil judgments relentlessly. The evidence we have compiled has also been prepared for submission to the district attorney for criminal prosecution. Elder abuse, fraud, forgery, identity theft. Convictions are almost certain. Prison time is a distinct possibility." Raymond looked like he was going to be sick. "However," I said, leaning forward slightly, "there is one path and only one path that avoids immediate criminal referral from us. It requires two things." I slid the settlement agreement across the table. "First, you sign this. It details full restitution of every dollar stolen, plus damages and legal fees. It will mean bankruptcy. You will lose everything you bought with my money. Your house, what's left in your accounts, any assets you have, will be liquidated." Raymond stared at the document, his hand trembling. "Second," I continued, my voice dropping even lower, becoming gravelly, "restitution isn't enough. Consequences aren't just financial. You need to understand, truly understand. As a condition of this settlement and potentially as a mitigating factor should the state pursue charges independently later, you will volunteer, full-time, 40 hours a week unpaid for 1 full year." Raymond looked up confused. "Volunteer? Where?" "Green Valley Care," I said flatly. "In the standard care wing, the one you put me in. You will work as an orderly assistant. You will clean rooms, change bedpans, feed residents who can't feed themselves, listen to their stories, see the reality you chose for me. You will be supervised directly by the nursing staff, and any infraction, any complaint about your attitude or effort will void this agreement, and the criminal referrals will be filed immediately." The color drained completely from Raymond's face. He stared at me, aghast. The thought of working in that place, doing the most basic, humbling tasks, stripped of his suit and status. It was clearly a fate worse than bankruptcy in his eyes. "Dad, you can't," he stammered. "I can," I interrupted, my voice like steel. This is the only offer. Sign the agreement, commit to the service, and perhaps you salvage something of your future. Avoid immediate prison. Refuse. And Frank's lawyers file the criminal complaints this afternoon. Your choice. He looked from me to Frank's stony expression, to the lawyer patiently waiting. He saw no escape. Defeated, broken, he picked up the pen. His signature was barely legible. The aftermath was swift. Raymond signed away his assets. The luxury SUV was gone. The house put up for sale in a fire sale to cover debts. Melissa filed for divorce almost immediately, likely advised by her lawyer to cut ties cleanly. Raymond moved into a cheap rented room somewhere. And then he reported for his first day of volunteer service at Green Valley. I didn't need to see it, but I heard reports, the initial shock of the staff, the grim reality setting in for Raymond. He wouldn't last the year without understanding consequence on a level money couldn't teach. As for me, with the legal matters settled and a portion of my funds recovered, Frank covered the difference and all legal costs, refusing repayment. I focused on rebuilding my life. I decided not to move back into my old house. Too many ghosts, too many tainted memories now. Instead, Frank helped me find a nice condo in a quiet retirement community closer to him, one with actual gardens and amenities. I directed a significant portion of the recovered restitution funds, anonymously, towards improving conditions at Green Valley's standard care wing, better staffing ratios, improved food services, new equipment. I also set up a small fund to help Gabriella, the orderly who had risked her job for me, pursue her nursing education. I found peace, not the naive peace of before, but a harder-won peace built on survived betrayal and reclaimed dignity. Raymond's actions left scars, but they didn't break me. Frank and I grew even closer, sharing dinners, attending veteran events. I started volunteering myself, mentoring young engineers. I reconnected with cousins Raymond had alienated me from. Life went on. Sometimes I thought about Raymond, working his year in the place he'd condemned me to. I didn't feel hatred anymore, just a profound sense of sorrow for the son I had lost long before I ever fell, and a quiet satisfaction that justice, in its own way, had finally been served. I had trusted his judgment once, and it nearly destroyed me. Now, he was living with the judgment he deserved. That's all for this story. I'll be back with another one. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing to the channel. It motivates me to create more content like this.